Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hello everybody and greetings. This is Stuart Andrew Alexander back with another show with a really interesting guest today. Her name is Margaret Marshall, who is commonly known as the healthy living expert. Now, Margaret speaks at corporate events, women's organizations, and higher learning institutions. She has been interviewed on local and national television stations and blogs for the Huffington Post. Margaret is going to talk to us today about how people allow their weight to increase, their health to decline, and how that affects every aspect of their lives in a negative manner, leading to a life where they no longer are able to engage in activities they once did. Their relationships suffer, and often their level of success is stunted. So with all of that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the show, Margaret Marshall. Margaret, are you there?
I am. Good morning, Stuart. How are you?
Well, it's good morning in your part of the world.
That's true.
Good afternoon in my part of the world. I hope it's
happy
not too
day,
close.
Happy day.
Yeah, exactly. But to answer your question, I am fantastic, on top of the world, and so excited to have you on the show because I just know how busy you are over there in the States. So with all of that said, shall we just get started?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Great. So let's just establish some common ground here and find out who is it that you help? Who's your perfect prospect out there?
I always say that's a really good question because the one thing we all have in common is that we eat. Now, we may have different styles of eating or different types of food that we like, or, if we live in different countries, we have different cultures even within the same country. But when it gets to the point where your eating is affecting your health, your body weight, your relationships, your happiness, your level of success, and that could be as early as 5 or 10 pounds overweight, and some people, unfortunately, wait until they're 70 or 100 pounds overweight to do something about it. So I work with women, I work with men. My largest clientele is women, and I work with families as well.
Okay, so when you say you help with all these different kinds of people that you just mentioned, how do you do that, Margaret? Could you just go a little bit deeper and explain or go over one or two problems, whether they're even real or perceived problems for the listeners out there, the kind of problems that you solve for them?
There's, for as many people as there are, there's as many problems because people perceive relationships and family members and situations in their life differently. So it's all about the individual's perception of a situation. So one situation could be a problem to one person and not to another. But just off the top of my head, what I hear a lot, even from grown women, is they still have these thoughts in their head of their childhood, and either they didn't have enough to eat in their childhood or there was too much food in their childhood. And if they did not have enough to eat in their childhood, maybe they didn't have enough money within the family or, whatever the situation was, they want to overcompensate for it in their adulthood. And if they ate so much, if the family and the meals were all wrapped around eating as a child, they haven't stepped out of that. And either way, whether you didn't have enough or you had too much, it could lead to an overweight adult life.
Mark, I can concur with what you're saying, especially with the habits that you develop in your home. And I guess in many situations, is it not a cultural thing, depending on where you come from and what nationality you are, where you grew up, your education, the amount of money in your family? Does all of these aspects have an effect on your eating habits?
Absolutely. I wrote a Huffington blog. I'm trying to think of the name, and I did it a while ago. I think I titled it, Why Do We Eat the Food We Eat? And it's all about the culture that you're brought up in and how different food items mean different things to you, and what food you go for, what food you stay away from. And one of the things I learned in my research by doing that is here in America, peanut butter and jelly sandwich is a staple. I mean, we send our kids to school each day with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and in other parts of the world, they would never think of eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So that just to me was amazing because, that's what we eat. But yes, absolutely, culture has a lot to do with it. And even if you're brought up with very good eating habits, sometimes in life you marry or you become partners with someone who does not have good eating habits, and you take on their habits. So there's just so many variables when it comes to eating.
For the people out there that are listening to you right now, Margaret, and they're wanting to increase their success in the relationships that they have, and even in the businesses that they have, they're wanting to increase the relationships with themselves, and they're listening to this advice that you're sharing, why should they actually become a customer, a believer, a follower, or of Margaret Marshall? What is your expert ability, Margaret?
Stuart, the way I would answer that is my book is called Body, Mind, and Mouth. And I titled it that because it's not a diet book. It's not a eat this, don't eat this book. It's really about how the mind and the mouth affects the body. And the body meaning your body weight, your body health, and what goes on in that gap between your mind and your mouth. So my philosophy is to get into the thought patterns that are causing you to eat and realize either they're benefiting you or they're a consequence to you, and learn how to know the difference, learn how to either enjoy the benefit and accept the consequence if you choose to go there. But I will tell you, I've been doing this, working in this field for 28 years. I say close to 30, but truthfully it's 28. And I have found that as people go on and they gain weight, their relationships suffer. And I've also found that their level of success declines. And I don't know if you will ever see this in research. I honestly have never looked at it. I'm just telling you, in my 28 years of experience, what I have found is, with the people that I've worked with, and there's been thousands, the more you weigh and the more unhealthy you are perceived, the less money you make. And I don't know that that's fair in the world. I'm just saying that is what I see. If you think about it, if an employer is looking to hire someone for a position and all things are considered equal between two candidates, only one is overweight, you appear unhealthy. So now the employer thinks, they'll never say it to you and they'll never admit it to you because, of course, that's illegal. But the employer now thinks, well, this is time missing from work. This is, more health cost. And the other one appears healthier. So all things considered equal, they're both as qualified. The employer is going to go for the healthier looking candidate.
It's not fair, but it is reality. It is a reality.
I wrote in my book, too. Of course, my book is about many clients that I work with and their stories, but I do share some of my stories in there. And one of the things that I wrote in my book, I'm married for 34 years to my husband, Chris. And I wrote in my book that, at the time of my life when I was just gaining weight, and I finally pulled it together when I was about 30 years old. And I've been in a size 10 since I'm 30, and I'm 58 now. So, like I said, I'm tall. I could have spent all those years still gaining weight. And I believe, I was already married. I was in a happy marriage. I believe my husband would have still loved me through it all. That's what I believe. And I truly believe that with all my heart. But we would not have been able to do all of the things that we were able to do, whether with the children, whether with ourselves, because the more you weigh, the less you do.
Let's talk about some misconceptions out there that you've come across in your 28 years, almost 3 decades of working in this industry. Name me 2 to 3 popular misconceptions that people you work with and have worked with have about increasing their success in relationships and business by improving their relationships with themselves and how it all relates to being overweight. So could you possibly go into that for us, please?
That's a compound question. So this is what I understand you asking, how people really feel if they're really not taking personal responsibility of themselves and blaming things that are not right in their world on somebody or something else. Is that what you're asking me?
You put it so much better than I did. Exactly. That's
Okay,
what I meant.
so what I find most often when I start working with people, when I coach people, it's really, I teach them my 5-finger food guide, which teaches them how to eat and teaches them how to eat in a healthy way. But it's so much more than that. It's like, let's get your life working for you. And when I first start working with people, one of the things I want to know is what's not working in your life and why is it not working. And what happens is everything is blamed on something else or someone else. And it's not, if it's job related, it's blamed on the boss, and it's blamed on the company, and it's blamed on the economy, and it's blamed on the person who's next to them at their desk. If it's a relationship, it's blamed on their husband. But what people need to realize is in every situation, they are the biggest component of that situation, that relationship. So what I get them to do is look to themselves and say, okay, you can't change that person, but you can change the way you react to it. And maybe if you can react differently because you like yourself better and you can stand up for yourself without being obnoxious and bullying, but you can stand up for yourself, the situation can change. And as time goes by, very often that's what they realize.
In terms of diet itself, does that have a bad meaning in people's minds?
I think diet, at least in the States, in the United States, diet has changed its definition to deprivation. And it really does not mean deprivation. Diet just means the way you eat. So I have an acronym for diet that I use, and it's DIET, decide, I added a how, decide how I'll eat today, DIET. And that's what diet means. You are to decide how I'll eat today. And once you take that decision on yourself and you realize what food is going to work for you and what food is going to enhance your life and what food is going to abuse you and destroy your life, you can draw the line between that. And it's never, never, never about deprivation, because deprivation will never lead to a healthy weight loss.
I like that acronym, Margaret. Could you just repeat it one more time for our listeners?
Sure.
I
If
think
you
it's
spell
quite
out
profound.
the word diet, D-I-E-T. So D means decide, and then I just put a how, H-O-W, decide how I''L-L, eat, E-A-T, today, T-O-D-A-Y. Decide how I'll eat today. And I always, when I do this in my presentations and I'm speaking in front of groups, I always say, we're in the 21st century and everything is the iPad, the iPhone, the iPad. So make it the I diet. I decide how I'll eat today.
In terms of when people listen to, the advice that you impart, and it's quite obvious that you know your craft. You're an expert within your field. You can help people. You have proof. You have case studies. You have the experience. However, there are people out there that would still, given all of that, still choose not to buy from you, not to work with you, not to take on your advice. What do you think the main reason is for that, or reasons for people not taking that action, that positive action to helping themselves?
They may not know me.
That's one.
They may not know of me yet, so they will now that I'm here with you. They will all know of me.
Exactly.
The thing that I find, and most especially when someone calls me to work with them, and I work with people all over because I'll work online. I'll do a coaching online where we both see each other face to face. So it's just like being in the same room, but we're face to face on the computer screen, and it's in real time, and it's not typing back and forth. It's really works very well. But what I find when people finally contact me, what they tell me is it took them a year to make that phone call. It took them 6 months to make that phone call. And during that time, they were continuing to gain weight. But people, I think, are so afraid that life is going to change so drastically, or maybe they'd had I don't like to call it failures because they're not, but maybe they've had time in their past where they've lost weight and gained weight and lost weight and gained weight, and they think, this is going to be it again. And truthfully, the only magic to losing weight and keeping it off is living a healthy lifestyle. And that's, where I try and get people to go. So I find that very often someone will say, oh, it took me so long to make this phone call, and I'm so glad I did. So I think you have to be, I hate to say you have to be ready. That's what they believe, you have to be ready. I believe make the time ready.
So what about if there are people out there that are wanting to take the step and gain from your experience, but they're afraid about what other people may think of them? Do you have some examples of that?
I have many examples of that. Very often people will say to me when I work with them that this is the biggest secret they've ever kept. And there's numerous reasons for that. One is it's really no one's business. It's really no one's business what you do. That's number one. Number two is they're afraid if they tell people they're trying to lose weight, people will sabotage them. And then sometimes it's also their line of work. Like I have worked with doctors and psychiatrists who come to me to help them lose weight, but they don't want their patients to know what they're doing. And I have worked with New York City firemen and New York City police officers who do not want their partners or their people in their firehouse, their coworkers, to know that they're doing, I guess because it's, I don't know, not macho. I don't...
What about the people who are not convinced that it will work for them at all? Do you have any examples of those kind of people in those situations?
Yes. I'll start working with someone and they'll say to me, I don't know if you're the right person. I don't know if this is the right fit. I don't know. And again, it all goes back to them taking personal responsibility. And once you start to realize that it's personal responsibility, and I will be honest and say some people come to me and they work with me and they're just not willing to put the work in. So nothing's going to work. I could bang my head against the wall and I have said to some people, I can't want this more than you do. That's not an equal equation.
So, we've spoken about who you help. You've made that clear about who you can help and who you work with. We've touched on some of the problems that are out there and some of the misconceptions and reasons why people would decide not to work with you and take on your advice. So, with all of that said, let's just go a little bit into who is Margaret. You're giving all this great advice, but there'll be some people out there that have never heard of you before. So who is Margaret Marshall and what led you to this field and what you're doing today? If you could just share a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. I grew up as a young girl with four brothers. And my four brothers nicknamed me Margaret, the Big Fat Target, because I was taller than anybody and I was an overweight child. And going through my teens, I did many unhealthy things to manage my weight, not eating and starving myself and eating just yogurt and things like that. And then in my 20s, I was married. I had my two children. And by the time I was 30, I was a size 16. And I was just getting to the point where I didn't want to leave the house anymore. I was just unhappy with myself. I didn't want to get dressed because I didn't like the way clothes look on me. And I was at that point. And I thought, if I'm this way at 30, where will I be at 50 if I allow this to go on? What's my adult life going to look like? And that was when I pulled it together. And honestly, I went to the local Weight Watchers, and I ended up becoming a speaker and a trainer for Weight Watchers for 17 years. Weight Watchers is a great program, but it's it's a box, and you have to think within their box, and there's so much more outside of that, and that's what used to frustrate me all the time. There was so much more to learn. I just kept studying and reading reports and things that I couldn't share because I had to sell their program. So in 2004, I went into my own business, I started a coaching business, and from there I went into speaking, and I started speaking, and then television came. And that, to me, I just love that. And so I do a lot of television now and radio, and along with speaking and coaching and writing.
Okay, so Margaret, we've got about another 6 minutes left. So what's your best piece of advice for women and men who are looking to increase their success in relationships and in business and realize that they want to improve their relationships with themselves? What's the best piece of advice that you could impart with them today?
Stuart, because I live in the speaking world and people speak on all different topics, one of the major topics that I see others speak on is leadership and how to lead teams and how to lead teams in business and how to be a successful leader. And I always think, if you can't lead yourself and if you can't have personal leadership within your own body and your own mind and your own world, how could you possibly lead other people? So I always say, go to yourself first and say to yourself, what is working in my world, what is working in my thought processes, and build on that. And what's not working, find a way to replace that with what is working so that you can go out into the world and be all that you can be because you have personal leadership.
And finally, Margaret, I'm asking this question from myself and for listeners out there, because I know some of the listeners out there, like myself, are self-employed. They work from home, and there's not a lot of movement within their life. And they're working some of them may be working long hours, and they're just simply not getting out as much as they should be getting out. And over time, they find that the pounds are slowly creeping, and increasing. What advice do you have for people like that? Even though we're so busy and you've got to make the money, you've got to,
Right.
You've got mouths to feed, bills to pay. How in the world can you make time for all of this fitness stuff and healthy living? I mean, come on, how do we handle all of that stuff? Please.
And there's not enough hours in the day. That's number one. Let's get a few extra hours. But since we can't do that, when I speak at corporate functions, I hear that all the time. I'm busy. And it's not only working at home. It's taking care of a family, and it's getting your kids to where they need to be, and it's having meals ready for your family, and it's everything. There's just not enough hours. But when I speak at corporations, I always say, I have two answers for you. I hope I remember my second one. But I always say, if you don't find the time to take care of yourself, you will have to find the time to be sick. That's the way it comes down to. So find the time to take care of yourself, because if you don't and you let those years go on, your career is going to end earlier than it needs to. Something's going to happen. Just like your car. If you don't take care of your car, it will break down. So that would be my first answer to you. My second answer is, and if anybody wants to go on my Huffington Post site or into my website, I have all my Huffington Post. The one that was posted this week, published this week, I always put quotes at the beginning of my post. And the quote that I used this week was, you can either make excuses or you can make it happen, but you can't do both.
Margaret, do you always speak the truth like this?
I hope it's the truth. It's the truth as I see it. It's the truth as I live it. And it's the truth as people have embraced it that I work with and changed their lives because of it.
It cuts like a knife, but it does. It cuts like a knife, but it's the reality. It's the truth, and it's excellent advice coming from somebody who's been in the industry for nearly 30 years. Any final thoughts? Yes,
I always end my programs with this quote, and I started my book with this quote, but I always end my programs with this quote as well. When you eat well, you live well. When you eat healthy, you are healthy. And when you nourish your body, you nourish your mind.
Margaret, I just love your analogies. I love your quotes. They're just so short and powerful and impactful, but they're full of the truth and full of meaning. So if there's somebody out there listening to you right now, listen to this interview, and they're thinking to themselves, this Margaret Marshall, she really sounds like somebody who I need to learn from, who I need to get in touch with, who I need to, find out more about, how would they go about doing that? How can people actually connect with you? And especially how they can find you on the Huffington Post as well, because I think what I'm gathering, this is an integral part of what you do. So if you could go ahead and just share those details with us, please,
first
Margaret.
You can go to my website, which is www.margaretmarshallassociates.com, and Marshall has two L's. Marshall, so margaretmarshallassociates.com. On my website, I have a page for all of my Huffington Post, and I also have some segments from television shows that I've done, and how to contact me if you want me to speak at any events. Or you can go to the Huffington Post, and at the top and that's HuffingtonPost.com, I guess. And at the top, there'll be a line, a search line, and just put in Margaret Marshall, and all of my posts will come up.
Excellent. Are you on LinkedIn as well,
I am
Margaret?
on LinkedIn, Margaret Marshall on LinkedIn, and I am on Facebook as Margaret Marshall Associates, and I am on Twitter. Twitter, it's Marshall MO1.
Perfect. And do you have a book or any publications out there that
I have
people
two
can...
books. I have Body, Mind, and Mouth, Life's Eating Connection, and I have the 5-Finger Food Guide. And you can either find that on my website, or you can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that books are sold, they have it. If they don't have it, they can get it for you.
Margaret, thank you so much for your time today. I know how busy you are, so I really, really appreciate you dropping in and sharing some of your expertise with our listeners. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Margaret Marshall, the healthy living expert. Do get in touch with her. She has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure she can put you back on the right track if you're having challenges with your weight. So with that said, you're so welcome, Margaret. I love speaking with you. You're just full of knowledge, and I can just feel just how much you care for the people that you work with. You're too. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.